used to think that the most stressful part of my day was coming home to a war zone. I live in a quiet, single-story house at the end of a cul-de-sac in suburban Ohio. It's the kind of neighborhood where the biggest drama is a neighbor forgetting to bring in their trash cans. But inside it was chaos. My Jack Russell, Cooper, and my Calico Luna hated each other. It was a constant cycle of yapping and hissing, a domestic routine I'd grown used to. But 3 months ago that routine broke. And now I'd give anything to have that annoying noise back. It started on a Tuesday. I was on the sofa, scrolling through my phone with the TV on low. The house was settling into that heavy midnight stillness. Suddenly the barking stopped. I looked up, expecting to see Cooper finally tired out. Instead, I saw him standing perfectly still by the sliding glass door to the backyard. Luna was right there next to him. They were shoulder to shoulder, motionless, staring. I checked the microwave clock, 11:16 p.m. They weren't growling. They were just unplugged. I called their names. Nothing. I whistled. Not even an ear twitched. After exactly 2 minutes at 11:18, Cooper gave a small, confused whimper and went to bed. Luna started grooming herself as if nothing had happened. I figured it was a raccoon on the deck and ignored it. But it happened the next night. And the night after that. Every single night at exactly 11:16 p.m. the war stopped. They would march to that door and stare into the void for 2 minutes straight. By Friday, curiosity turned into a nagging anxiety. At 11:15 I stood by the door with them. As the clock clicked over to 11:16, the motion sensor light on the garage snapped on. I braced myself to see an intruder, but the yard was empty. No breeze, no animals. Just empty grass. Both Cooper and Luna took a sharp, synchronized step backward. Cooper's tail tucked, and Luna's pupils dilated until her eyes were solid black marbles. The next morning I went out to investigate. About 8 feet from the door I saw it. A patch of grass was flattened. It wasn't a footprint. It was a large, circular indentation about 2 feet wide, as if a heavy, rounded weight had been sitting there for hours. No tracks leading to it. Just a perfect, heavy sinkhole in the lawn. 8 feet from the glass. Over the next few days the pattern became terrifying. On Monday the indentation was 7 feet away. On Wednesday it was 5. It was moving closer like a slow-motion tide. But then I realized something that turned my blood to ice. It only moved when I watched. I ran an experiment. One night I stayed in my bedroom with the blinds closed. The next morning the mark stayed at 5 feet. But the following night, when I stood at the glass and acknowledged it, it moved to 4 feet. I wasn't just observing it. I was inviting it. My attention was the fuel. It was a psychological trap. I knew I shouldn't look, but how do you ignore a threat that's slowly crawling toward your throat? One foggy Thursday I tried to catch it on my security camera. At 11:16 the light triggered. On the phone screen the yard looked normal. Then for a single frame the video glitched, a jagged line of static. When it cleared I saw a shape. It wasn't a monster. It was a tall, pale, featureless column that seemed to absorb the light around it. It stood there for a heartbeat, then vanished. The next morning, the indentation was pressed against the concrete lip of the patio. The night before everything changed I didn't sleep. I sat in the kitchen with a baseball bat. 11:16 came. The motion light stayed on for 6 minutes straight. I couldn't see anything through the glass but my own terrified reflection, but I could feel the weight on the other side. A pressure against the house. Then at 11:14 the following night, the pets didn't go to the door. I found them in the hallway facing my bedroom door. My stomach dropped. The garage light clicked on outside, but I didn't care about the yard anymore. I hadn't looked at the glass, so it shouldn't have moved. But the rule had changed. It didn't need me to look anymore. It was already in. I stayed frozen in bed, the sheets pulled to my chin. The house was deathly silent. Then I heard it. It wasn't a footstep. It was a slow, dry crunch. The sound of carpet fibers being compressed under an immense, dead weight. Step. Pause. Step. It sounded like shoes made of lead and sandpaper. I could hear the grit from the yard grinding into the hardwood of the hallway. Cooper whined, a low, pathetic sound, clattering his tags against the baseboard. Luna was sitting on the edge of my bed, her back to me. She wasn't looking at the door. She was tracking something slow on the ceiling, directly above my head. I didn't look. I closed my eyes and prayed for the sun. At 6:40 a.m. I finally moved. The backyard was perfect. No indentations. No flattened patches. But in the hallway, the carpet fibers were permanently matted down leading into my room. I tried to vacuum them, but they wouldn't rise. The weight that pressed them down never truly left. And then there's Luna. She hasn't hissed at Cooper in days. She spends all day on the foot of my bed, her eyes fixed on my face. She doesn't blink. She just watches me with a focused, intense hunger, as if she's waiting for me to acknowledge what's standing right behind me. I haven't looked in a mirror since Tuesday. I'm afraid that if I do, I'll see the rule in action. I'm afraid that if I catch its eye, it'll realize it's finally close enough. I can still hear the carpet crunching when I'm alone, and I have a feeling that tonight at 11:16, I won't have to go to the door to see it. I've always been a creature of habit. I think most people who live alone are. When you don't have anyone else to pick up after or account for, your routine becomes a sort of internal clock. For me, that routine ended every single day at the small brass hook right next to my front door. I'd walk in, drop my mail on the side table, and hang my keys. It's a habit I picked up after losing my car keys in the couch cushions 3 years ago. Since then, they've lived on that hook. My house key, my car key, and a small beat-up LED flashlight keychain that doesn't even work anymore. The house key is distinct. It has a deep, jagged scratch right across the bow from when I dropped it in a gravel parking lot last winter. It's a small detail, but it's how I've always identified my set in the dark. My house is an older build in a quiet, somewhat isolated suburb. It's the kind of place where the loudest thing you hear at night is the wind rattling the siding or the occasional owl in the woods behind the property. I like the silence. Or I used to. Last Tuesday I got home late from a double shift. It was around 11:15 p.m. The street lights were flickering, and the air had that biting, damp chill that usually signals a storm is coming. I fumbled with the lock, stepped inside, and reached out to hang my keys on the hook. I stopped mid-motion. Hanging there, on the same brass hook, was a set of keys. At first, my brain just didn't process it. I thought maybe I had left a spare there? But I don't keep a spare on the hook. That defeats the purpose. I squinted in the dim amber light of the hallway. I reached out and touched them. They felt cold. Heavy. I pulled my own keys out of the lock and held them up next to the ones on the hook. My stomach did a slow, nauseating somersault. They were identical. Not just the same brand of key, but the same keychain. The same non-functional flashlight. And when I turned the house key over in my hand, there it was. The same deep, jagged scratch across the metal. I stood there for a full minute, my heart beginning to thud against my ribs. I live alone. I've lived here for 3 years. No roommates, no girlfriend, no family members with a spare set. Even the landlord doesn't have a set with that specific keychain on it. I grabbed the second set off the hook, clutching both tightly in my palm. My first thought was that someone was in the house. I dropped my bag and did a sweep. I checked the kitchen, the coat closet, behind the shower curtain. I checked under the bed. Nothing. Everything was exactly as I'd left it that morning. I went to the front door and checked the locks. The deadbolt was thrown. I checked every window in the house, all locked from the inside. There were no signs of a forced entry. No muddy footprints, no disturbed dust. I sat down at my kitchen table, the 2 sets of keys sitting in the center of the wood like some kind of glitch in reality. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I had made a spare months ago? I thought. Maybe I'd forgotten I bought a second keychain? I went to the junk drawer in my office where I keep my actual spare. I pulled it out. It was a plain, silver key with no keychain at all. Now I had 3. The silence of the house suddenly felt heavy. Oppressive. Every little creak of the floorboards as the house settled sounded like a footstep. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, even though I was certain I was alone. I ended up staying in the living room that night, the TV on low volume just to have some background noise. I didn't want to go to sleep. Around 2:30 a.m., the local news had cycled into a repeat broadcast, and I was starting to nod off. That's when I heard it. Click. It was subtle. A metallic sound coming from the front of the house. I froze, my eyes snapping open. Click. Stop. It was the sound of the front door handle moving. Not being rattled or shaken, but being turned very, very slowly. Like someone was testing to see if the latch was engaged. My blood turned to ice. I grabbed my phone, my knuckles white, and crept into the hallway. The house was pitch black, save for the faint glow of the street lamp coming through the frosted glass of the front door. I watched the handle. It moved down maybe a quarter of an inch. Then it stopped. Click. It moved again. Whoever was on the other side was being incredibly patient. They weren't trying to break the door down, they were trying to be silent. Then the worst sound I've ever heard in my life filled the hallway. The heavy, mechanical thud of the deadbolt sliding back. Clack. The door had been unlocked from the outside. I stopped breathing. I was paralyzed in the middle of the hallway, maybe 10 feet from the door. I should have run. I should have screamed. But I just stood there. The door creaked open just a few inches. A sliver of the cold, damp night air slipped into the house, smelling of wet asphalt and dead leaves. The gap was dark. I couldn't see a face, just a vertical line of the night sky. In a voice that didn't even sound like mine, a high, shaky whisper, I managed to gasp out, "Hello?" No one answered. There was no lunging shadow, no whispered threat. Just the sound of the wind. Then I heard footsteps. They weren't coming toward me. They were moving away. Slow, deliberate steps across the wooden porch, then onto the gravel driveway. They sounded calm. They sounded like someone who had finished a task and was simply leaving. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Whoever that was, they didn't need to come inside. They had already been inside. I lunged forward, slamming the door shut and throwing the deadbolt. My hands were shaking so violently I almost couldn't grip the thumb turn. I locked the handle. I pushed the heavy hallway bench in front of the door. I turned around, leaning my back against the wood, gasping for air. My eyes darted to the brass hook. The second set of keys was gone. I had left them on the kitchen table. I ran back into the kitchen, my phone flashlight cutting through the dark. The table was empty. Only my original set of keys remained. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I sat in the corner of my bedroom with a kitchen knife in one hand and my phone in the other, waiting for the sun to come up. As soon as the sky turned gray, I called the police. They came out, took a report, and looked around, but there was nothing for them to find. No prints on the handle, no signs of a struggle. They told me it was probably a prank or that I had simply misplaced the keys and imagined the handle moving. I almost believed them. I wanted to believe them. But then I checked my phone. I was looking through my photos to see if I had any pictures of the keys from earlier that night to show the officer. I scrolled past photos of my dog, photos of work, and then I saw it. A photo taken at 2:31 a.m. It was a picture of my front door taken from inside the house. From the exact spot in the hallway where I had been standing. In the photo, the door is cracked open those few inches. You can see the curtain blowing slightly in the breeze. And in the gap of the door, visible just for a second in the flash of the camera, is a hand. It's holding up a set of keys. My keys. With the same jagged scratch on the metal. Underneath the photo, in the metadata where the location and caption usually go, someone had typed a single sentence. "Thanks for checking the locks." I moved out the next week. I'm in an apartment now, on the 4th floor, with 3 different locks on the door and a security camera that pings my phone every time a shadow moves in the hallway. But sometimes, when I get home late and I reach out to hang my keys on the hook, I hesitate. I look at that jagged scratch on the metal and I wonder, which set am I holding? And more importantly, who has the other one? The hallway watcher. It was a Tuesday night, right around 11:48 p.m. I was home alone, just scrolling through my phone in the living room, enjoying the quiet. But that quiet was interrupted by a sound coming from the back of the house. It was a knock on the back door. Now, this wasn't a normal knock. It wasn't the quick, light tap of a neighbor or a friend. It was slow. Heavy. 3 deliberate hits against the wood. Like someone was testing the strength of the door. I don't get visitors, especially not at midnight. I sat perfectly still, hoping that whoever it was would just go away. But then I heard a sound that made my heart drop into my stomach. The doorknob started moving. It was turning back and forth very slowly. Someone was checking to see if I had left it unlocked. I didn't wait around. I quietly backed away into the hallway and dialed 911, my voice barely a whisper as I gave the operator my address. "Someone is trying to get into my house," I told her. The operator was silent for a second. I could hear the faint clicking of a keyboard on her end. Then she asked a question that sent a chill down my spine. "Are you alone in the house?" "Yes," I whispered. "Are you sure?" My blood went cold. "Yes." Why are you asking me that? There was another long pause. Then the operator's voice changed. It became sharp, urgent. Officers are 2 minutes away, she said. But listen to me very carefully. Do not look behind you. Stay exactly where you are. Do not turn around. I froze. I wanted to scream, to run, but my legs felt like lead. Suddenly, the house went completely silent. The knocking stopped. The doorknob stopped moving. It was so quiet I could hear my own shallow breathing. And then, I felt it. A puff of air. Warm. Moist. Right on the back of my neck. Someone was standing directly behind me. So close I could feel the heat radiating off them. I was shaking so hard I could barely hold the phone. I think someone's in here, I choked out. The operator's voice was chillingly flat. We know. I felt something shifting behind me. Barely audible footsteps, the sound of skin against the hardwood floor. They were matching my breathing, rhythm for rhythm. Then I heard the creak of my bedroom door opening behind me. The door I knew I had closed earlier. Now, the operator shouted through the phone. Run out the front door. Don't look back. I bolted. I don't even remember unlocking the front door. I just remember running into the street, where 3 police cars were already pulling up, their lights flashing against the dark houses. I collapsed on the sidewalk, gasping for air as officers rushed past me into the house with their guns drawn. After a few minutes, one of the officers walked back out. He looked pale. Are you okay? He asked. Why did you stop in the hallway? I didn't stop, I told him, shivering. I ran as soon as the operator told me to. The officer looked back at the house, then back at me. We were watching you through the window as we pulled up, he said. We saw you. You were standing perfectly still in that hallway for almost 4 minutes. Right in front of your bedroom door. No, I said, my voice trembling. I told you I ran immediately. The officer gripped his flashlight tighter and looked at the dark doorway of my house. Then, who were we watching standing in your doorway the whole time? They never found anyone inside. The back door was still locked. The windows were shut. There was no sign of a break-in. I never went back to that house. I moved out the very next day. But sometimes when I'm alone in my new apartment, I'll feel a familiar puff of warm air on the back of my neck. And I realize that whatever was standing behind me that night never actually left.